Probably the anxiety one. So that was nice to kind of, just think of different ways to overcome anxiety on your own.
I really liked it, especially the one about letting go of anxiety, and I really liked the way that she explained it about, what did she say, possible future misfortune, because I really identified with that, and I had never actually thought of it that way, but that's exactly what anxiety is. And I mean, I feel sort of lucky that I usually don't have deep anxiety about things, but it also helped me understand other people that I know who do.
I've always been drawn to like meditation and stillness. I'm an introvert by nature. So once I was able to kind of honor that about myself, it kind of led me into practices that suit me. So journaling and going to yoga and meditation has really been the primary way in which I've really been able to learn to have control over, all of the internal movements. And it's just, as soon as I started meditating, it was very, very clear to me that this is the thing for me. It was. To me, inner peace means sort of having this very calm and still center that everything spirals off of. It means being grounded and also having a strong sense of who you are. And yeah, I think knowing who you are and honoring that is one of the greatest.
Understanding your identity.
Yeah, and knowing, instead of trying to look outside yourself for all the answers and who you are and what you should be, looking inside yourself for who you are and basing your life off of that, it creates that peace and internal friendship, really. Yeah.
I think my favorite one was the guy who talked about how we will pass away at some point in our lives, and because of that, because our lives are only finite in time, our words have a word count. Like in a document on the computer, the words that we use, we'll only use a certain amount of words in our lifetime. And that it's important because of that we choose our words wisely. He said, do you want to be remembered as someone whose words were always filled with sarcasm and criticism, or do you want to be remembered as somebody who spoke from deep down with motivation, passion? And I was like, I want to be that person,
I think it's hard to separate the two when both are such a part of my life. I would say that music has always been a big part of me. I mean, ever since I was little and could walk and talk, I was pretending to play guitar and starting a band, so to speak, with my family. And so that was just a part of it. But then when I was in, I'd say about 14 years old, I read a book called Developing the Leader Within You by John Maxwell. And it just radically changed my outlook on life because I realized that I needed to be doing more to make a difference in this world. And so I started spending all my spring breaks and summer breaks volunteering by building community centers and homes and orphanages in Mexico. And so just kind of throughout my life, it's been a big part of doing both. Right now, I'm just involved with a lot of exciting projects. One of them is building a Center for Human Rights in Portland that explores the civil rights history within Oregon. So that's something we hope to see come to fruition in the next year or two. And I would love to see that flourish and grow. I'm also involved with the Oregon Environmental Council. So there's a few things that we're working on that we would love to do to preserve Oregon's natural beauty, our clean air and water. And of course, my work with the Slants, I hope it continues to transform lives and to inspire other musicians to take up their instruments and also embed some of their activist spirits in their art.
I feel like to talk about the first speaker. I don't really remember his name, but it was on brain science. That was definitely my favorite one. It really relates to what I've been studying in college so far. I've been taking psychology, a little bit of sociology, and so that was really interesting because I do live with my grandparents, and you know, sometimes they forget my name, so it's like, how does the brain work? And it's just so interesting bringing all those points together where they were talking about how in the last 30 years technology has really grown, especially towards brain science, you know, neuroscience. So that was interesting to find out for me.
Yeah, well, definitely the first talk. So the first talk was on just kind of like how to stop the decline of like cognitive thinking, and I study psychology at the University of Oregon, so it was really interesting to me.
Motivation is to understand that in this explosion of neuroscience, there are tipping points, and I think we reached one this year. What we've always figured is if the pill gets here, we'll take it, but what can we do in the meantime is our challenge. And what we found is that the combination of things you do, some little, some big, make a difference. But there was no science behind it. This year, at the highest level of Alzheimer's research in Copenhagen, at the annual conference that the researchers flock to, drug companies annually announce failures and some successes, but primarily failures. Mia Kivipelto from Sweden has a finished study in which, for the first time ever, the gold standard of research has shown that a randomized controlled trial of people just doing things that we have been advising for years, do a balanced cognitive intervention to do things instead of sitting watching TV, those trials not only slowed the decline, but showed a cognitive improvement. Game changer. Because what we've been teaching students, that the science is moving in that direction, has reached the tipping point, and we think it's tipping toward doing it yourself and away from putting all your research eggs in one basket. It was a jump start, and it happened in a 5-minute period over a decade ago. I was an activity director at an ALF, assisted living, in Salem. It was my first day on the job. I'd been promoted on the Friday to activity director when the activity director walked out, and they said, "Do you want to be the activity director?" And I said, "I don't have any experience." And they said, "You'll be trained on Monday." So I come in Monday, I get trained with the 3 B's. He came in and said, "Here's my card. Just remember the 3 B's, Bibles, birthdays, and bingo." And at that point, he said, "You got my card, call me if you have any problem, just follow the calendar." So my first event, which was at 9 o'clock, it was Sit and Be Fit, which is a terrific program out of Spokane. So for 20 minutes, I'm sitting and I'm being fit with 6 human beings in front of me who didn't know me because I was new on the job. And I'm watching them go through the routines, which are really good for them, and some in wheelchairs, some with walkers. And at the end of it, I got depressed because I was seeing their faces were just lifeless. So what I did was to use at the very end, when they're ready to move, an old game I played with my Nana, my one grandparent. I said, "Repeat after me, 1 hen." And one person, Lucy Buncher, who still lives in Salem, said 1 hen, and I said, "Good." Then I said 1 hen, 2 ducks. They all perked their heads up and listened. 1 hen, 2 ducks, 3 squawking geese. When I got to 1 hen, 2 ducks, 3 squawking geese, 4 limerick oysters, 5 pork-dealing porpoises, I had them laughing. They wanted to continue. I said, "No, we can't go on. I've got to get to another activity." And they said, "When can we do this again?" On Wednesday, at the next Sit and Be Fit, we had 9 instead of 6, and pretty soon 15 and 20. And I realized that I was sparking their brains by doing something that was just fun. So I invented taste aerobics, touch aerobics, thinking memory aerobics would be sense-oriented, and then got discovered by some neuroscientists, and we did clinical trials. Next thing you know, I'm learning. I didn't know what an axon was, but I learned that if I understand it, I can translate it and allow people to know why their brains fail.
I think I need to start working on my brain a whole bunch. And the 6 elements that he mentioned that we needed for, making sure that we maintain cognitive ability, I think I'm going to work on those. So it was really encouraging, I should say.
A deeper connection with people just by asking for what I need to be able to support other people in a healthier way. Not being afraid to speak my voice and to share my vision with the world, and hopefully at some point in the near future, I will be on TED Talk as well.
I think I'll look into a lot more of the topics that were discussed here, things that I had never heard of, didn't know were going on. I mean, even though the darknet, I never even knew that existed. It's an interesting idea, and that's what I like. We watched TED Talks on Netflix and things, and we saw it was coming to Salem. It seemed like a great opportunity to see what's kind of cutting edge.
So modding is basically taking a computer and modifying it. It's a lot like hot rodding a car. So in my particular expertise, I like to build the NASCARs, the race cars. And I take a computer and I modify it by making it faster, run cooler, and I essentially work towards trying to set something like a world record. That's my holy grail. That's what I want to accomplish. So essentially, being an online payment system is how you would say what is Bitcoin, is an online payment system. Now, in the heart of it, it's a cryptocurrency, and that's where things kind of get crazy. It's complex cryptography using mathematics that prove the existence of every individual coin in the network, and that coin represents value. The coins can be traded below 1 coin, so you can actually trade it down to 8 decimal points, known as a Satoshi. Now, if you think about 21 million Bitcoins and you divide that up to 8 decimal places per Bitcoin, there's a whole lot of Satoshis that can be used out there. So it's actually a currency that can scale extremely well. You think, how can $21 million work for the world, let alone the United States? It actually works quite well because you can end up with billions and trillions of the currency. And the value of the currency, how much is a Satoshi worth right now and how much will it be worth 100 years from now, determines the effectiveness of it. And what kind of pulls this all together is the Bitcoin network. It's modeled after the internet. It's a nice web of interconnected computers that work through the network, through the internet. And essentially, whenever a transaction is made, it goes to the single public ledger that's shared among all these computers. It's contained in every Bitcoin, and it's contained on the cloud. And when I make a transaction, it goes out there and notifies that I'm sending this funds from my address to somebody else's address, and that propagates the network. That's going to prevent counterfeiting, that's going to prevent double spending, and also it's going to allow me that if I walk away from my phone or I lose my phone, I can go walk to another device, sign in, and be able to access my funds.
People often ask about, well, where does music talent come from? Are people born that way genetically? Does it come from training? And I think the experts say it's a bit of a combination of the two. You know, we are born with aptitude for certain things, but when it comes to music, we are music. We are all born with that aptitude. One of the videos I'm going to show in my talk is a video of a little baby that's 9 weeks old singing with her mom. And it's the most amazing, beautiful video clip ever. It's so powerful because it speaks to, we all have that. We all have voice. We all have the rhythms of our body. So as far as becoming a professional musician, because children's brains are developing so rapidly, it's essential to have them in a music program. It's developing every skill set you can imagine for them to be taking music lessons. And the sooner the better. It allows them to develop those essential skills, and then they can really move on with their own practice in the future. You know, some people are really, I've talked to people who have never had any formal music training, and they absolutely create the music from their own innate knowing or by oral tradition. They learn it and they find it and they figure it out. Other people are formally trained and they learn how to read music early on, and they never quite bridge over to move into their own personal improvisation of how to express themselves. Some people who have experienced music for themselves and they've decided they want to deepen their understanding of what they're doing and saying, they can simply approach it like another language, because that's what it is. They have an advantage because they understand it personally, and it's just a matter of understanding someone else's paradigm. Someone else called that note that you love so much, that la, they've given it a name, and they've given it a position on the piece of paper so that anyone else who wants to sing la will know that when they see that. So I remember when I was learning piano and I was really scared. I was afraid I was like gonna mess up. And I decided that what I would do is I would simply make friends with each key one at a time. And that came to me because I used to be really terrified of going into a party. And someone said, well, Jody, why don't you just sit down with one person and talk to them? So it's that simple. You just make friends with each element one at a time at whatever pace that you're ready. So there's a really cute story behind this ukulele. When I was asked to do the TED Talk, I thought, oh my gosh, I want to definitely do some singing with the group. And not just me, I'm a music therapist, so we're not talking performance, we're talking this is for the group to sing, for their own health and wellness. And a friend of mine had written a song, and he played an ukulele. And I said, oh, Kalani, can I share the song with this group? He said, absolutely. And I just loved it. And so this is a song. It's kind of it's a call and response where I sing and then the audience sings, I sing and the audience sings, and eventually they'll catch on. And it goes like this. If I wrote you a song, would you sing your song with me? If I wrote you a song, would you sing your song with me? Sing your song with me. Sing your song with me. If I showed you some steps, would you dance your dance with me? If I showed you some steps, would you dance your dance with me? Dance your dance with me. Dance your dance with me. If I played you a beat, would you play your drum with me? If I played you a beat, would you play your drum with me? Play your drum with me. Play your drum with me. Way to go, Ryan.
I particularly like the TED Talk with the guy who played the bass and had autism or Asperger's type of autism. That was really interesting.
There were so many good ones. The Equalize the Vote, the Mark Frohnmeyer, he was really, really interesting. I wasn't aware of the inequality of the vote. You kind of just assume when you vote that you are having an equal say in everything that's going on. I thought that the talk that we watched from the video of the bionics was crazy. It was very inspiring. I had kind of followed that girl's story from right after the blast, and I'd heard of her desire to be able to dance again, and I mean, that just brought me to tears. That was really epic.
Sensory processing disorders are different for everyone, but one of the differences I have as someone with autism is I'm very sensitive to certain types of sound. Even though I'm a professional musician, there are types of sounds that I experience differently than most. And the example I like to use is a silly one. Okay. I'm afraid of balloons. A grown man afraid of harmless everyday birthday party balloons. When I go to a restaurant, I don't look at the menu, I don't look for an open table, I look for the little kid having a birthday party. Because when I hear a sudden loud noise, a concussive sound, I experience physical pain. I can't control it, I can't choose to experience it or not. My brain just has these crossed wires, which is part of autism and the sensory aspect of the diagnosis. So everyone is different in how they experience different sensory things. I'm also sensitive to touch. If I think about it, I can feel every thread and every crease in every piece of clothing that I'm wearing. And an issue with autism is we have trouble turning that off or shifting our focus away from sensory issues. So it's one thing to feel that your sock is twisted a little bit to the left. It's another when you don't have the ability to say, that's not important. I need to focus on the teacher at the front of the classroom. And that's one of the challenges in the autism world, is both understanding those differences and recognizing that we can't always control where our focus goes when we experience sensory issues differently. My approach to music is a little different. I was fortunate enough to attend several camps run by Victor Wooten of Bella Fleck and the Flecktones in Nashville, Tennessee, and he teaches music in a very different way. He teaches music as a language. He looks at music as a language. Whenever we discuss music, he flips it back to language. So my approach as a musician is very influenced by his teachings. So when I perform, I think of the notes as words. We're not just playing scales, we're not playing theory, we're not playing a minor seventh chord. We're trying to convey a message to the audience. And because an aspect of autism is sometimes having difficulty connecting socially and communicating, music works really well for me because I can say things with my guitar I can't say with my voice, or they come out clean, they come out pure. Sometimes when I try to get the word from my brain to my throat and out of my mouth, it doesn't come out the way that I imagine it in my head. But music is another communication tool that I feel I can use to really express a message that's universal. I think when we look at autism or other disabilities, it's important that we separate the label from our perspective and our self-esteem. We often build our supports in the disability world on deficits. If you can't do something, that is who you are. We identify not by what we can do, but what we can't do. And I think it's so important in the autism community that we recognize that the word autism or the word disability opens up services and supports that we can't access without those words. But those labels don't define who we are. We get to choose what those words mean. We get to choose whether we connect our self-image to the word autism or disability or not. When I was diagnosed, they told me all the things I would never do. They said I would never drive a car, I'd never live alone, I'd never work with my hands because I'd failed some of their motor skills tests. But I didn't let that diagnosis define me. And today, I work throughout the state of Oregon, driving my own car, both working with families and playing music. And it's not that I'm special or different or have some gift other people don't. I'm just really stubborn. And I've always believed that I get to decide what I can or can't do, and no label or diagnosis gets to decide that for me.
for the entire time that we have been a country, we've used ranking systems for voting. And actually we've used the very simplest ranking system, which is, we just pick our favorite candidate out of the mix. But it turns out that that system, and actually all ranking systems, create these basic inequalities in the voting franchise itself, which, and the simplest one you can see, it's the spoiler effect. And where if you like two candidates in a race and I like one, I actually have twice as much power as you do, because everyone who thinks the way you think is going to divide their votes, and everyone who thinks like me we're going to concentrate our votes. And because of my background, my family life growing up, I actually experienced the spoiler effect in a very personal way. And that was what triggered me to start thinking about this particular problem, which is, how do you distill what all the people want into the choice of one person to represent all those people? And I've grown up in Oregonian and studied history and sort of really believed in this American system that we've developed, and believed that we were supposed to be equal in the voting franchise. And what I came to recognize actually really quite recently was that spoiler effect really represented this very fundamental inequality in the vote. And that as I studied more, I realized that every ranking system, even if you're ranking multiple candidates like instant runoff voting, first choice, second choice, third choice, that they all suffer that same inequality problem in various different ways. And what really the kind of the core of the problem is that we make a choice on a job instead of being able to look at each candidate. So what the shift over to rating does is it really changes the referendum. So instead of making one choice on each office, we actually get to look at everyone on the ballot and say, attribute some measure of value. Now, the simplest way to do that is just a simple yes or no. Do I like that guy or not? And you can make it more higher resolution. So you could do like Amazon 5 stars or 4 stars or whatever. But at the core of it, what rating allows us to do is to really separate the field of candidates between those we like and those we don't. And that's really absolutely critical. Making that shift is critical to having an election system that scales beyond two candidates. I mean, really, the system we use today is only fair if there are two people in the race. And it's that factor about it that creates this two-party system that we live with. It's not that we have more than two parties, but only two party, if we are limited to that one choice, it's a two-party dominant system. So people end up being compelled to join one of the two major parties in order to have a reasonable voice. And candidates have to run from one of those two parties in order to have a prayer of winning, right? The office holders that we have in our whole state government are all members of one of the two major parties. One of the things I think is really a huge challenge is that a friend of mine introduced several times a bill to limit the use of toxic chemicals in toys that were destined for children. So, you think about toys that kids put in their mouths and, all that. And that bill has the support of 80% of the public in Oregon. It's an overwhelming majority. So this isn't a Democrat issue, it's not a Republican issue, it's an issue of the people. And yet, for whatever reason, that can't move through our governing structure. So that is one of those things, and it's just one example, but there are many, of where what we want as a people isn't coming to pass in the halls of our government. And this is not to blame the lawmakers we have. I think actually Oregon is blessed with a crop of some really fine, really smart lawmakers. It's that the structure of the system, the structure of our election system, is just set up to make it very hard for those things to get passed.
Well, part of the fun of coming to the event is all the different topics, but I like art, so anything to have to do with art would be an exciting event for me.
I love the stuff about the new technology, just like with the bionics TED Talk as well. That was really interesting. just technology in general I think is interesting, some of the new stuff.
There's a genetic condition that I have. It's called synesthesia, polymodal synesthesia. And what this does is it causes me to see sound and hear light. So vision and hearing are the same sense to me. They're just two sides of the same coin. And it also causes me to read and do math using just sequences of colors. And this is a condition that's caused by different brain regions growing neural densities at a greater pace than normal people in certain regions. And how that affects me, there are things that positively affect my life and things that really negatively affect my life about it. One of the positive things is that I have a frequency analyzer built in because I always see anything that I hear. It goes from very low tones over here, which are always kind of yellowish, through like a deep bass drum or a bass guitar will be orangish and it'll be right here, through human voices, which are going to be either red or purple depending on their gender or their age, to blues up here, which can be like a high violin solo is going to look blue. A flute is going to look green and it's going to be right about here, and past that really, really high pitches, they get too small for me to see and they're back to yellow and they're up here. So I can tune my guitar without a tuner, just because I know precisely that this form of photographic memory called eideticism that comes with the synesthesia that allows me to photographically remember all of the colors that I see or that I read or that I do math with. And that comes in real handy. It allows me to learn languages very quickly. It on average takes me a month or two to learn a language as opposed to 2 or 3 years. But some of the detriments are I can't hear people outside. If I'm out and I'm in direct sunlight, I have to read lips. Because I can't hear over the sun, which is just a really high-pitched squealing noise. And camera flashes sound like gunshots. And so those are things that, some people, they tell me they wish they had it, and they say, well, these are the downsides too. It's not all. Yeah. It's whenever I see a camera flash go off, I think there's a gun going off somewhere. So you take the good with the bad. When people ask what it's like to have synesthesia, I ask people what it's like to not. There are 2 simulators that I've built. One is an application that runs on Google Glass or camera phones or tablets. And you can plug in headphones to your device and you can hold it around and walk around and kind of basically see the world the same way that I do, because it'll take the microphone data and overlay the visuals that I see, and it'll take the camera and play for you the sounds based on the colors that it's receiving.
How can people get that?
That's on my website, dana.stayskull.com. And you can go, it's open source, you can download the source code, and it should work on your device. Make sure you have headphones plugged in though. And the second simulator, which is the one that I built, was inspired at Burning Man last year. And I built it only took about 4 weekends putting it together out of just a bunch of spare parts that I had laying around my apartment. It was inspired because I wanted to not just be able to share, this kind of clinical view of what synesthesia looks like to me, but I want to be able to share something that I'm most passionate about, which is music. That is, I choose music that I like based not just on what it sounds like, but also on what it looks like. It has to have, it has to have real beauty in both senses. Otherwise, it's just, not that solid to me. So in order to be able to share that, I decided to make the guitar simulator as well, which has a lighting strip that goes, an individually addressable lighting strip that goes around the guitar, and it's controlled by a tiny Linux computer called a Raspberry Pi that's driving an Arduino that's driving the lighting strip. And yeah, that has been really well received. Everybody that I've performed for, usually at music festivals in and around Cascadia, they've all said, wow, this actually helps me see the world the way that you see the world, which that's what I wanted, right?
That's kind of an interesting question, because as I mentioned in my talk, We're moving away from a paradigm of a desktop on every desk to having computers throughout. But I kind of see still having powerful computers in your house, but those will actually almost act as your mainframe of your computer. And so I see people perhaps wanting these to be more artistically pleasing and being able to embed into your actual home and maybe being almost like a piece of furniture. So for example, on the Vanilla Ice project, we built a PC, 2 PCs into an aquarium that was mounted on the wall and filled it with mineral oil, so it actually became part of the functional furniture. The other system we built was 2 computers, high-end computers built into a desk that was made the whole computer. So I think you'll see as we go along maybe more wall-mounted computers and computers becoming more part of different everyday household items. If computer modding will continue, I can't really say. It'll probably just be something else. Maybe we'll mod our other devices. It's hard to say. I can't paint very well. Can't sculpt, so I use the computer modding as my art form. But the other thing that's really cool is I'm also a college instructor here at ITT in Salem. I teach networking and computer programming, but our school also has drafting and design, and we have electronics, so I'm able to use all these, or help students become engaged in all these different areas and get them involved in projects. And then what's really exciting is that we've been working with the Marion Polk Food Share for the last year, doing their IT support, building their workstations, making it so that they don't have to spend money on computer hardware and services, and that's more money they can funnel back into the community. So I'm able to leverage a lot of these different things that I'm doing out in the corporate world, in the professional world, and bring it back in locally to better prepare our students to hit the ground running and to have living wage jobs.
So I first heard about aquaponics when I was working at Sequential Pacific Biodiesel. I've been doing the go to school for a year, then work for a year, then go to school for a year, kind of off and on. So during one of those spells, I met a gentleman, David Towery. And basically it blew my mind because current model, animals produce manure, as I said. But in this case, we recirculate water with just fish being our manure producers. And it works symbiotically, it works together, it conserves water. And I was like, why isn't everyone doing this? We can grow more with less, and it saves energy, it saves time. We can do it year round. The first thing it would do is save space. If our food crops are grown in an aquaponics system, especially if they're grown in urban environments, then that frees up farmland to increase the production of exportable goods. As far as energy savings, I don't have any specific numbers off the top of my head. The one we set up next door is a 9-watt pump. We did set up one system out at a farm in Willamina. They use one pump to run their entire greenhouse. Much more energy efficient, definitely. If you apply solar panels, you could run the whole thing off solar panels. You could apply wind energy. There are other kinds of energy saving devices you could use. But compare that to the gallons and gallons of diesel that are going to be burned, like plowing a field, planting, harvesting. It's just, I don't know, it's ridiculous to even think that we're still doing that. There are a lot of resources online. David Towery and I, we do a lot of web-based research, but we also go around and talk to farmers about what do they need, what are the biggest issues they're facing, and how can we alleviate those. So I guess get involved in your community, find out where your food comes from. If you can, go and talk to that farmer, figure out what it is that they're doing. We see a really big interest in schools. I mentioned on stage that we could revolutionize the menu, since so many of the problems kids face is because of diet and exercise deficiencies. We really want to get involved with implementing in these schools and having kids kind of like volunteer in the design, in the construction, and in the operation, so that they not only kind of like use the skills that they learn, say in shop class or whatever, we also want to teach them how to run a business, because this is America. We're capitalists, and small business is actually the greatest employer of our citizens. So we need kids that know how to run a business.
Well, something that really interests me is government, because I think government is how we all get together as human beings and decide how do we live well together. And I'd really like to see a discussion about that, not about bashing government or thinking government is a bad thing, but government is us deciding how do we in this small space, all of these organisms, come together and make life better for each other.
Education and empowerment, and I'm really, really interested in how the brain works. Actually, that first TED Talk about brain science was fascinating to me. I'm interested on how people's minds change when they change from an initial paradigm to a future paradigm, and how they make that those connections in a healthy way without, going crazy. So I would love to hear stuff like that.
What I notice is that, praise is, I don't know if I'd say negligible, but I'd say underserved, and criticism, if it's underserved, it's not underserved by a lot. It's not as underserved as praise is. What do we do about it? Some of the things that I mentioned were mostly to try to get the watcher to think about it, right? Because you don't want an expression of gratitude to be merely rote. You want it to be real. You want it to be sincere. Examples I've seen people do them in their families that every year, put out stuff for the postal worker or for the garbage collector, around the holidays. I know some people who try to have a rule to say, listen, every time we're leaning on folks, bureaucrats, elected officials, or whatever, we make sure if they do something good, they also see us then, right? Either with an email or a personal visit or a letter or a card. I think that there might be things structurally that we can do when we create a thing, for instance, like a transparency website, and talk about the activities of government to also make sure we're saying, hey, are we not only being a watchdog of bad behavior, which is important, but are we also being a watchdog or a trumpeter of good behavior to promote that kind of stuff? A culture that included more gratitude, and specifically in this context to public service workers, I think would help in two ways, impact the world in two ways. I'm pretty sure it would help in at least one. I think it would help with the delivery of public services. I think it would help, which matters in a lot of different ways. I think it would help in terms of retention. I think it would help in terms of recruitment. So you have better people all the time and you keep the best people that you have, and you have more people vying for positions. I think it would increase the performance of the people who are there, I think. The thing I'm pretty sure of is that there's a gratitude quotient to be had by people who express gratitude. If we become, I don't want to sound too sappy, but if we become more loving people ourselves, which is something probably a lot of us are working at, that's something I've been looking at kind of recently, that it can impact our own habits, impact our own health. So I'm pretty sure about that.
I do like the ones that are more, I guess, social, and they tell you about people and ideas. I also like talks about technology.
I'm kind of just interested in a variety of topics. I think anything from philosophy to religion to science, the whole package.
Education, just different ways of interacting with students, I think would be really interesting.
I really enjoy hearing TED Talks from social psychologists. I think it's really interesting. I also like hearing about different city planning TED Talks, or ones from major philanthropists. Another thing that I enjoy studying, and just really innovative ideas and things that either I can learn to better my life or other people's lives around me.
I think that it'd be interesting to hear people talk about happiness. I think that happiness is something that we always strive for, but we look to kind of mundane ways to figure out what will make us happy. Like a lot of times people spend a lot of money on items and things, or we just want and want and want because we think it's going to make us happy. But maybe if we just live in the moment and be appreciative for what we have, that might be true happiness.